I want to tell you about a new podcast called Amuse News. Publishing multiple days a week, Amuse News is your source for food news, interviews from around the food world, and more. On the show, we'll be engaging with food storytellers, from chefs to advocates to people working in the field, and many more. Find Amuse News wherever you get your podcasts. Amuse News is a destination for everyone who's looking for a new, insightful look into the world of food.
Today's show is sponsored by Bob's Red Mill, employee-owned and operated, and founded on the principle of good food for all. Learn more at bobsredmill.com/podcast.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. We're a member-supported food radio network broadcasting over 35 weekly shows live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. Join our hosts as they lead you through the world of craft brewing, behind the scenes of the restaurant industry, inside the battle over school food, and beyond. Find us at heritageradionetwork.org.
Good morning, Heritage Radio listeners. We are coming to you live from Bushwick, Brooklyn, from the back of Roberta's Pizza. I'm happy to welcome my guest today. It's Brian Loiacono. He grew up in Long Island in a large Italian family. At age 19, he went to stage at a 2 Michelin-starred restaurant in Oxfordshire, England. And then upon returning at age 19, he began working as a cook at Daniel. He spent a lot of time in the Daniel Boulud family. He's worked at Bar Boulud and DB Bistro Moderne. He is now the chef of Acme, which is located in Soho. He was selected as a Zagat 30 under 30, and we're happy to have him here talking about how he has come to work at where he does today. Brian, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's start at the early childhood out on Long Island. I'm curious to know, who was the actual cook in your family? Is this like a grandma runs the show type of Italian family? Give us the details on what Sunday supper was like at the Loiacono household.
Grandma definitely ran the show until I was about 12. She passed, and my father was always, he loved to cook, so he would really run the show on Sundays. My mom picked up a couple of her old dishes as well, and the whole family gets involved with it, really.
What are some staples from your family? I've had actually a couple people on the show that they are from Long Island, and they're from large Italian families. Besides the Sunday gravy, were there a couple things that were in your grandma's or in your dad's repertoire that stick out in your mind?
Manicotti. We have that every Christmas. I mean, it's like a thin egg pasta crepe, you'd almost call it, filled with ricotta cheese on top with just tomato sauce, which is pretty simple. Stuffed artichokes I used to get on my birthday because they were great. They're just a little tedious, so I think that's why I get them once a year. Stuffed flank steak, just lots of classic Italian dishes, really.
Was it a family around the table type of scenario? Did you eat in front of the TV? Like, how strict was it?
It depends on what. If it was me, my mom, my dad, and my sister, you can get it around the TV. But if grandma was involved, you're sitting down, for sure.
So is it mostly Italian food growing up? Were there any other culinary influences that your family brought into the house?
Well, my grandmother has a cookbook that goes back to like the 50s, and it's either like magazine scraps or old, perfectly grandma cursive written recipes and whatnot. And some, you could see through it. She's got a lot of Indian cuisine going on in there, which I didn't have much of, to be honest. I mean, we'd have a lot of Sunday gravies, things like that. But as I looked through that book, it's a lot of curry recipes and you could see she was interested in that.
That's cool. I love the handwritten cursive grandma recipes. It's weird for people to think about that back in the day, you didn't just go to pick up a cookbook, and you definitely didn't go on a website, obviously. So your grandma made stuff with her mom or her dad, and then everything was written out. And I love hearing that a lot of the instructions, like obviously us as chefs, we're now weighing things out to the gram. That's usually how we're doing things in restaurants, or we're overseeing a very specific process. But did your grandma, do you remember any like funny notations or anything like that? Was she a very specific recipe taker, or was it like, grab some of this, grab some of that?
Yeah, there was a lot of that.
Yeah.
There was like, the bowl. There's a couple of the recipes say one bowl of, and it's like, it's 30, 40 years ago, which bowl?
Yeah, what bowl in the kitchen were you trying to grab?
And it's funny that my great grandfather, I just found this out 2 weeks ago from my dad because his uncle came over As immigrants in the 20s maybe, or actually I think it was like the 1913 they came over from Sicily, and they signed up as shoemakers. That was on their immigration file, whatever there is, and they were shoemakers. But then, as of a couple months ago, we found out that my great grandfather was a cook at St. Francis Hospital for his entire life, and he just signed up as a shoemaker for a reason that we don't know. But I thought I was the only real professional chef, and my grandmother loved to cook. My dad's a hospital administrator. I mean, now I found out my great-grandfather was actually a cook as well for his whole life.
That's awesome.
I know, right?
You got to dig deeper into that and find out, maybe he did have experience making shoes, and they were like, we don't need a shoemaker. We need somebody who can
who knows?
cook.
I have no idea.
That's awesome. All right, so it's actually in your blood. You're not
apparently,
you're not the first one in the family. Tell me, though, when you were growing up, you were the first one to really pursue a culinary career. Was your family into that? Were they behind it? Were they apprehensive to let you go into something that isn't a traditional career trajectory?
Yeah, they were. I mean, I was a dishwasher when I was 14, 15 in Huntington, and then it was a high school job until we were graduating, and I kind of, I don't know, I didn't really have anything else I wanted to do. So they were very supportive. I mean, my dad said, as long as you do the best or try your best at what you're going to do, you're fine. He really wasn't. So
what did you end up doing after the high school dishwashing jobs? What kind of led you into the next choice that you made?
I had an apartment in Astoria right out of high school with my buddies, one of my best friend's older brothers, and I worked at Olives in Union Square when it used to be the Todd English restaurant. That was the first restaurant I worked in that wasn't like the Clubhouse Steakhouse or the Chow Baby's family-style pasta place with a pound of pasta on each plate. But it was cool, and they were always encouraging me about going to Europe and whatnot. And I just, I did go to Johnson & Wales for about 2 weeks. Wasn't for me. Didn't like it. I just didn't. I looked around. I mean, I support all culinary schools. I just think I went a different way, and I moved to England. After leaving Denver, with my buddies all went to CU Boulder. So when I was like, yeah, of course I'll go to Colorado and Denver. This is going to be great. And then I hung out in the mountains with them for a bit, moved to England. And that was a real awakening. I mean, it was kind of where I got my butt kicked heavily.
You'll have to pronounce the name of the restaurant for me because I'll butcher it. But tell me the name of the restaurant in Oxfordshire. It was a 2 Michelin-starred restaurant.
Yeah, the Manoir Quat'Saisons.
And
the Manor of the Four Seasons. Raymond Blanc was the chef.
And so tell me about that experience. What's it like to go to a different country? It's probably a very formal, rigid cooking environment. You're very young. What goes through your head when you arrive?
It was intense. I'm not going to lie. But it was great. But you also just realize, that's when I first realized that there was a lot more to the career than just, being the best prep cook in Huntington, Long Island, or, being able to run a 300-person service at Chow Baby or something like that. That's when I realized that there are a lot of guys that were really good at this culinary thing that I was looking into. And Le Manoir was maybe 2 Michelin since the late 80s, something like that. And they've had a lot of great chefs run through there. And we had our own. It was the truly self-sustaining restaurant. It was in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there was one street light in the town of what was it called? Great Milton was the town outside of Oxfordshire, or outside of the city of Oxford. And there was one bar there, one store. They had their little, I guess your shoemakers, things like that around. But it was a very tight-knit place.
So really, a very much a destination restaurant. Was it in an actual hotel, or was it a standalone restaurant?
It was a hotel. Mm-hmm. They had the English football team had a wedding there one day, and they bought it out. They had a helipad in the back, and somebody would land the helipad, and then they'd pick them up in a rolls, and then bring them to the restaurant, and then bring them back. It was kind of nutty. It was cool, but I was really trying to survive. In my own, I was getting handed 8,000 asparagus that I had to pick in the morning. And then, it was the first time I had to take the little leaves off, and I was just like, this is ridiculous.
Not quite flipping burgers in Huntington.
Yeah, and also not quite getting involved with their true, processes in the kitchen or on the line yet, because I really wasn't very good. Mm-hmm. It was,
so they had you just prepping in the back day and night, basically.
All the time. I mean, we had to be there at 7, then we had our little break during the day, and then we finished through the service at nighttime.
Did you ever end up doing any line work? How long were you there for? It was a stage, so a couple weeks?
Well, that's the thing where it got tricky. I overstayed my tourist visa.
Okay.
And then I came home to see my family, and I'd been there for maybe 6 months, something like that. And I, had really just international ignorance. I had never even thought about it. Thought I was pretty okay. Didn't think I was going to get deported when I went back to England. And then I went back to work at the Waterside Inn in Bray. And when I got to Heathrow Airport, there was a controversy about my, what was going on in my passport. And they said, "Can you stand over there?" And then they plastic zip tied me and put me in like their little Heathrow room for 2 days, and then sent me back to the States. So
Wow.
I never actually made it to the Waterside Inn.
So you got like properly arrested at the airport.
My sister framed my "you got deported from England" thing for me a couple Christmases ago.
Okay,
So that happened.
So England wasn't meant to be, but you learned a lot of awesome stuff when you were in Oxfordshire.
Oh, yeah.
And then so you come back and you've got a bit of a foundation. You've got this groundwork of this classic technique. What's the next thing that you do once you get the cuffs off and come back stateside?
I got over at Restaurant Daniel, and it was really what England did the most for me is when I started at Restaurant Daniel, I knew how to act, and I knew how to work, and I knew how quickly to work and how serious it was. So it really changed my attitude when I started. The Manoir was that of a very inexperienced cook, and when I got to Restaurant Daniel, I kind of knew a little bit more of how to act, what to say, what not to say, how to really push and run around.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about this because for those listening and that have never even dined at a fine dining restaurant, not even at the caliber of Danielle, can you talk a little bit about like the kitchen culture there? What do you mean when you say like I knew how to act? Most people probably are thinking, does that mean that you showed up on time and you finished your prep list? But I don't think they really fully understand what a classic French 3 Michelin-star restaurant kitchen is like. Can you dive into that a little bit?
Everybody's very serious. Everybody's there for a reason. They're there to learn and evolve and grow up to be chefs. So everybody, you don't want to. You're not there to make friends per se. You're not there to run around and talk or anything like that. It's not that environment. It's a very serious one, very loving one, but it's a very serious one at that. So you really have to put forth your work. As you know, if you're working next to somebody and they're not pulling their weight, probably not going to be their best friend. But, if you're working around a group of guys that are really pushing and going towards the same goal, then, you get a very camaraderie group in the kitchen.
So you're like 19 or 20 years old at this point, something like that?
I was around. I guess I was just turning 20.
And you're there like full time. You're pulling really long days.
Yeah.
And are you back at home? Are you living in the city? I
was living at the time on Henry and Allen in Chinatown. Which was like, this was like 10 years ago now. So it was, it's definitely a little bit more built up now. The 169 bar was there, but definitely,
that's it.
Definitely not like,
Not
Mission Chinese is over there now and all that.
Yeah. It wasn't like the cool spot to be. It was like you could kind of afford to live there.
Barely. Yeah, but it worked. I lived on the ground level. We had an outdoor deck. I learned what that meant when you don't pay that much money for rent, which was pretty rough. So
you have a garbage dump in behind your apartment. Is that
actually
basically what it was?
The back patio, it was a building where like it was the first floor, the second floor, and the third floor to the seventh. There must have been like 400 people living in it, and they just used their back windows as like a garbage chute, which was my back patio. So I would come outside, and there would just be like a whole fish with just the head on, like laying in the middle of my deck. And yeah, they used to get mad if we'd be outside listening to music, so they would just throw buckets of like crap over it while we were hanging out to get us to stop making noise and hanging out, and it worked. So I just moved out in due time.
Now you'd pay like $2,700 for that spot. They'd be like outdoor space in Chinatown. It's like people be fighting, banging down the door to try to get that apartment.
Put up one of those like event tents, those like little tiny like white tents.
Yeah, let all the waste sort of roll off the walls.
Yeah, they threw like a huge heavy weight down, and it destroyed I came home and it was just crushed in the backyard. So,
what was the energy like for you? Being a young guy in New York, you're living in Chinatown, kind of edgy. I mean, you're from Long Island, but it's still a different world being in Chinatown. And then you're kind of shooting up to yet another different world, another aspect of New York. What was that like navigating that kind of like downtown cook lifestyle where you're like going up and then it gets fancier, and then you're at work?
You're just, you definitely see the difference when you get out on 65th and Park. That's it was, to be honest with you, it was a lot of fun. I mean, I always enjoyed it. That's probably why I kept going for, so long of just grinding away and working. It was never something that was so stressful. I mean, you could see your differences. You run into your problems along the way, but I had I had a blast. I was at Daniel only for about 6 months, and then I went to open Bar Boulud with Damian Sansonetti, who I was working there and prepping with them. I think he was the banquet sous chef, and they had asked him to be the executive chef. And then it was a whole other thing. I never thought I was in this Michelin kind of grind, and then I went over to do this bistro restaurant, and it was a blast. It was just another step. That's where I started to learn more about my, your hand skills, working the line. Like I remember I didn't know what it means to like glaze a vegetable. And they were like, I just kind of like pulling a fake it till you make it attitude for a minute. So then I looked over and I was like, oh, is that glaze? Okay, I got it. And then I just kind of kept going. I think it was about 2.5 years I was at Bar Boulud. They made me the sous chef when I was halfway between being 21, 22.
Which is incredibly young.
Yeah, it was huge. And that's when I was just kind of, I was just running around and pushing. That was kind of how it went.
Becoming the sous chef in the Boulud restaurant group, obviously, being a sous chef anywhere, there's a lot of responsibilities. Did you feel like two things? Did you feel like you yourself had the abilities to take on that role, or were you feeling nervous and like fake it till you make it? And also, did they provide structure for you? Like besides your chef leaders within the restaurant, did that group have anything that helped you take on that role beyond just basically saying to yourself, like, I really hope that I can pull this off?
Well, I mean, they wouldn't have given me the job if they don't think I could have done it. But I mean, then you definitely step into a whole new world of responsibility. And yeah, of course, it was very, I was very nervous. But you just get to work a little earlier and stay a little later and just push through it. And it worked. They're a massive group, and they focus very hard on who they promote and who they focus on and put time into. And it developed over time for me. Like, after that, I went to Restaurant Daniel, and then I went back again to working the line. And then I worked, I remember my first day, I was on the fish entremet, and then moved up to the fish station at Daniel, then the meat, and then Jean-Francois Bruel, who I really learned a lot. I mean, between him and Eddie Leroux at Restaurant Daniel, I spent a lot of time with them, almost 3 years there, and then they made me the sous at Daniel. And that was, you work just as much, just as hard, but you start getting better. You start learning more, you start changing your mind, your ideas about food, and it was a great progression for me.
Tell me about the changing of your thought process and of how your mind works going from line to sous at both restaurants. I'm curious, when did you start feeling like you were developing a specific leadership style? Going to become a sous chef, how do you earn the respect of those other people in the kitchen? How did you go about doing that? Besides just getting there early and staying late and showing that you do the work, what were some things that you grabbed from those chefs that you still cling to now that you're running your own spot?
I mean, for me, every time it changed, you just realize how much you did not know before. So when I was the sous at Restaurant Daniel, everything I was kind of either annoyed about for getting yelled at for, or kind of as I moved up. Once you get to that point, even now, I'm sure yourself the same thing. You turn around, and every week of your career, you could turn around and realize that you've learned more in the last week. So that's kind of what happened. I mean, it wasn't like you can't go in there looking to have respect for people, and you're there to learn for yourself. And along with that, you kind of gain these new responsibilities, and you just keep learning. That's kind of how it went for me. And I just kept always realized what I didn't know the week before.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with Brian here on the line.
I don't think there's anybody worthy to run this company but the people who built it. I have employees who've been with me for more than 30 years, and plus. Each and every one of them deserves to be an owner. That's just the way it ought to be, and that's just the way it is.
This is Bob Moore. He and his wife Charlie started Bob's Red Mill almost 4 decades ago. Today they offer one of the largest lines of organic whole grain foods in the country. And in 2010, on his 81st birthday, Bob gifted ownership of the company to his employees.
I'd received plenty of offers to buy my company over the years, but selling out never felt like the right thing to do. When the time comes to let someone else run this show, I can't imagine selling it to a stranger. Giving the company to my hardworking employees just feels right.
The company now has an employee stock ownership plan, or ESOP. Stock is put in a retirement plan for all of its employees. When employees retire, the company buys back their shares. According to the National Center for Employee Ownership, about 11,000 companies in the U.S. currently run as ESOPs.
It just shows how much faith and trust Bob has in us.
That's Bo Thomas, the company's engineer and maintenance superintendent. He's been with Bob's Red Mill for over 27 years and has put his 4 children through college in the process.
For all of us, it's more than just a job. And obviously, it's the same way for Bob, too.
Bob is still very active in the company. He's the president and CEO, and you'll find him working at the mill just about every day. Because when you love something this much, you want to be a part of it.
Well, I may have given them the company, but the boss part is still mine.
Bob's Red Mill is committed to sharing only the freshest, best-tasting whole-grain foods on the planet. Learn more about their mission of good food for all at bobsredmill.com/podcast.
Welcome back to The Line. I'm here with Brian Loiacono. He is the chef of Acme in Soho. He's worked at a lot of places. He's mostly been involved prior to that with the Daniel Boulud restaurant group, and he spent time at Daniel, Bar Boulud, and DB Bistro Moderne. But also, Brian, you were in Montauk, and so was I. So I wanted to talk with you a little bit about what it was like at Rushmeyer's. For listeners that don't know, Rushmeyer's is a very small hotel with a very large restaurant with a lot of outdoor seating, and Rushmeyer's is sort of like a party spot. So you were the chef there for the first summer that the Smile in New York held the F&B contract, meaning they were the food and beverage operators for it. So I'm curious, how did you get involved with the job, and what was it like moving out to Montauk for the year to run a very high-volume seafood restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, I left Restaurant Daniel to move to Italy, and I worked at a 2 Michelin restaurant, or it was a stage, which I was much more understanding of the rules of visas and tourist visa and all that. So I was out
Went there legally to Italy.
Went there through Amsterdam, took the train down, and then took the train back because I knew just not do what I did the time before. And that was great. It was a 2 Michelin called Ristorante Perbellini, just south of Verona, which was great. I've always wanted to go to Italy. I always wanted to work and just get some of that culture in there, see something different. And on my way, while I was getting ready to come back, I was looking for jobs through Craigslist, or forget exactly how I got put in touch. Actually, I think it was from a friend contacted me because Matt Kliegman, one of the owners of the Smile, was looking for somebody out in Montauk, and I actually accepted the job like 2 days after I got back from Italy. So I was, there, kind of went home, said hello to my family in Long Island, and then shot out east. And it was, it's a trip living out in Montauk for the summer. It was a lot of fun, but it was also my first executive chef job ever, and being in charge of like a whole program and, putting together the menu. And it was great. I mean, you can never complain about living out in Montauk for the summer. I definitely, after month 3 or 4, you've definitely been out there for the whole summer and you feel it. But, it was cool. I mean, it was a challenge for me. I definitely did a lot of work, but it was also a lot of fun.
What were those challenges? You'd been at so many fine dining restaurants. You'd been in the Michelin zone for so long, and it's not really like that out there.
Nope.
At least, I mean, I came 4 years later when my brother and I ran it. We were co-executive chefs for the 4th year, but I imagine that the crowd was fairly similar, and what they're really looking for is like good food fairly fast, and it's kind of like a Turnham and Burnham environment because the covers are so high. So like when you were creating the menu before anybody came to like 2 months into the summer, how much changing went on? Like how much were you evolving things once you were getting your feet out from underneath you, It
was actually it was probably the best experience, one of them in my whole career, because with Matt and Carlos over there, it was the first time that I ever started to try to be myself. And with their encouragement, just watching how they've done things over time, it was really a turning point for me to be able to start. It was tough to get out of that Michelin vibe. I went out there and my first thoughts, I'm throwing a puree on a plate, and then I was just by the end of the summer, I had a whole different thought process on food, and it leads up to getting over to Acme and how we're doing things over there nowadays. But it definitely, it was another learning process. I learned a lot. I knew I was doing one thing for so long with Michelin food and, precision, which is still important with any food, but my mind started to change with what I liked more with food and, how I wanted to relax a little bit and be myself.
What I found to be so challenging about that job is, at Acme or at any restaurant, that's you have some time. I mean, obviously you want to be hitting on all cylinders right away, but there you have 3.5 months of service and then you're done, right? And so you don't really get a chance to really get a feel for what's working and get a vibe. It was like a constant kind of like push and pull.
Right.
So now that you are at Acme, I'm curious, like how do you work with menu construction? How do you put things on and take things off at Acme, since you have a little bit longer leeway than you do at
it's been about a
seasonal restaurant?
Yeah, it's been a little over a year and a half now at Acme,
Right.
So it's definitely had some time to take a look. I mean, menu development is one of the most important things in my mind. So I think, I guess at Acme we try to have a certain mix of dishes. Everything from small bites that you could share. We like to have a nice vegetable components going on. Like we definitely have a few vegetarian dishes. Always have something that's vegan. It also helps, as you know, as a chef. Maybe listeners at home might not know, but it's much easier in my mind to have those dishes ready to go for vegetarians, people that are dairy free, people that are doing gluten free. Instead of when you get somebody with an allergy or something like that, you have to run around and make something. So we definitely focus on a lot of that to make it. We don't want to just throw a vegetable plate together for somebody for an entree, so we try to have something ready to go and already thought through.
When the owners of Acme brought you on, so it's John and Jean-Marc are the owners of Acme. When they brought you on, Acme was a very different restaurant prior to your taking over. How did you work with them, and how did it work with staff, if any stayed? I'm curious about front of house, back of house. Can you just briefly tell the listeners like what was Acme in its first incarnation, and sort of how would you describe it now, and how that affected the process of, like, did you close the restaurant? Was there an education process for front of house? How does that work when a restaurant retains its name but a whole new talent takes over leadership and changes the direction of that restaurant?
We closed in January 2016, and kind of, we took about 2 weeks of being closed to get everything together, all new silverware, whatever we got to reopen, and some training for the front of the house and also the kitchen staff. But before that, I was there from maybe October, November, doing recipe testing and being in the basement. We did a lot of tastings, a lot of talking, a lot of kind of breaking through ideas and seeing what was going to work the best. And then when we opened, it was, we opened a little pretty simply, not trying to get too crazy, kind of be safe for the first month. And then as time went on, we kind of pick and choose what we liked the most, what was going well, and then we developed into the menu we have now.
And so how would you kind of describe your menu? What is the food that comes out of the kitchen at Acme?
And, I love people always, because it's not French, it's not Italian.
I don't want to box you in.
No, I know. It's the question that's been hitting us for like the last year and a half. I mean, it's not. There's the new American comment, which I guess that would be if you put a label on it from what everybody talks about the food. It'd be new American, but really, we go through phases. I mean, as the season comes along, we play with a lot of. We play with a lot of Spanish techniques. We play with a lot of Asian techniques. I mean, we have a lot of different minds in the kitchen. One of my sous came from the Empayon crew back in the day, and his hot sauce game is amazing. One of my other sous came from the Breslin crew, and he's got a great mind for different dishes, different flavor combinations. We open up the idea of if anybody has an idea, we could talk about it, and it often develops into a cool dish. And it's kind of putting a team together that everybody wants to kind of have an influence, and if they don't really have the edge for it to figure out a dish yet, we all talk about it together, and it really has developed into a place that we kind of have a lot of different ideas going around, and they come together on the plate at the end. It's a lot of fun.
Besides being on the line and recipe development, a lot of people like to hear sort of like the behind the scenes of what it's like to be a chef. I'm curious about what's the one thing or couple things that you do in your job that you don't enjoy, that are hardest for you, and that you're either you're dealing with it or you're working to overcome your sort of hatred for said task. I mean, there's so many things besides like actually what goes on the plate. And I'm curious for you now that it's really your spot and it's your collaborative vision with your kitchen team. What's a task that falls to you that you struggle with?
I mean, I'm thankful to say that I don't truly hate any of them, which is nice. It's really good. I mean, before I came here to do the show, to be honest, I wasn't feeling the best this morning, but I knew I had to get up and go take care of payroll before I came over here. So, of course, I shot to the restaurant, took care of that, took my bike over the train, came over here. So, I mean, it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's part of the job, and it's, in the past, it would be something that was a little bit more frustrating because I wasn't that good at it, or I didn't really truly grasp the concept of how to do it correctly or whatever. But I mean, really, what you want to do is cook all day and make dishes all day and prep all day, but there's a lot of other things in between that you got to do to get you guys paid or make sure the structure of the restaurant's working properly, the scheduling is going to go well, vacations, all that stuff. So don't hate any of it, but there's anything but being able to sit over a cutting board is a little less fun, that's for sure.
There was an article that I read today in the Boston Globe. It was about the high cost mental and financial of being in the restaurant business, which is a topic that's been covered many, many times. But they interviewed several people that had left the restaurant world to either downsize their operations or maybe move into the corporate world. And I guess how I want to frame that question for you is that in New York, as wages continue to rise and things are becoming more and more expensive, how are you hoping to retain and attract talent beyond just being competitive from a pay structure? It's really expensive to live in New York. I think sooner or later we're going to be talking about not that skilled line cooks be commanding like $19, $20, $25 an hour, which is very hard for someone in a leadership position and in an ownership position. What are your thoughts on all of the financial aspects of how difficult it is to go into the restaurant business and also retain what you have created in the restaurant business? I think about it all the time. Obviously, anybody in our industry would talk about that often. It's just, you got to develop new ways to be smart and intelligent about how you run your kitchen, what you order, what you put on the plate. And for the staff, it matters a lot too. I mean, if you're going for it and you're truly explaining to them why you're doing certain things and why things are the way they are, and keep them involved. That's I just try to keep everybody involved, talk to everybody, always be honest with everybody about what's going on and why, and make an environment that's very welcoming. We don't really. Voices could always be raised in the kitchen, but at Acme we definitely have if somebody messes up, it's more of a disappointed vibe. There hasn't been a screaming match. We try to keep away from those. So it's, I think it's an environment. These guys are all doing the same thing that I am doing, that most cooks are doing. It's so different than it was when I started, where cooking is now like this huge thing that wasn't as popular when, you and I started doing it. Yeah, when you really got into it, 10, 12 years ago, it was like it didn't have the same sort of allure, and I think that potentially people didn't think that they could move up so quickly.
Yeah.
Have you experienced someone, maybe not even at Acme, but in the past kitchens that you've worked in, who just thought that things would move a lot quicker for them? And how do you deal with that when someone comes to you and like they might think that they're ready and they're maybe not ready? Have you had that discussion ever with a cook?
Yeah, plenty of times.
Okay.
It's also sometimes you got to respect everybody's own thoughts of what they're doing, and if they want to move on and move up in their own world, you let them. If guys are ready in my world, then they, we talk about it, they move up, and if they're not, then of course we talk about it. If they're not happy, that's just a certain kind of chef that you want to have working for you. Sometimes some guys are ready to move up, and I'll talk to them about that before they talk to me about it. And then there are some guys that aren't ready at all, and when they want to move up, when they're disappointed, it's not an argument. It's just, all right, well then, go move up somewhere then, because it's not. I think it's a certain breed of chefs that truly can sit there and put in the time and put in the work, and they turn out truly seasoned and very talented. Let's say
that the 19-year-old version of you walks through the doors at Acme, right? Mm-hmm. And they're looking to start, and you have an opportunity to really look that person in the face and tell them what they need to do. Besides just working hard, what advice do you have for a very young person who's starting to cook in New York City?
I would focus on yourself and your skills. Also try to always be surrounded by people that are better than you, that you have something to learn from. keep your head down and keep focused. That's about, I've just not, when I see somebody that reminds me of myself, it's, I wouldn't say embarrassing, but I think back to myself at 19 and I'm like, oh geez, man, I've changed a lot. But I could definitely if I looked at my 19-year-old self now, I would just shake my head and be like, come on, man, get it together. What are you doing? So it's, I wish everybody the best luck. You just got to make an atmosphere that's going to be healthy and, fun for everybody to work in.
Since you've spent so much time in New York and you've been in many different restaurants at various price points, I'm curious about what's exciting you right now in the food space. I think that we're seeing a lot of trends both shooting up and down, and by that I mean like there's really, really high-end tasting menus which are very popular right now. You can spend $400, $500 a person, and there's also kind of like this low-end thing happening where there's a lot of cheaper items that people are trying, like Mark Ladner is doing like a pasta restaurant, but it's fast casual and it's very inexpensive. I'm curious, like across the whole spectrum, since you've worked in restaurants of the whole spectrum, is there anything that really excites you, and is there anything that really bothers you?
Bothers me. I mean, we all got things that bother us in the food industry for sure.
Well, I'm happy I want to hear one of them.
I mean, I think I think Salt Bae is hilarious. I saw him basically like power bomb a fillet onto the cutting board, and then you have like the majority of the people in this world are like, this guy's amazing. Which, you know what? More power to him. The guy's crushing it, and I've seen some of his food. It's great. I'm very interested by the fast casual side of things. I mean, I really do. I think about that all the time. Different concepts that have really interested me, like Italian food. I like to make Italian food much more simple than I used to think it was as compared to Ristorante Perbolini in Italy. French food, like the late night French bistro vibe, really interests me right now. And the South, spent my whole time like trying to go to Europe and doing New York. I just want to get down south and see what they're doing. I was down in New Orleans recently. I was over in Nashville not too long ago. I want to get down to like Louisville, Kentucky, and see some places that I really have never explored.
What interests you are you talking about like sort of what everyone thinks of the South, like barbecue style, or are you talking like more just in general what is happening down there in terms of sourcing? Like what interests you about it?
I would say less of what's happening now, because it's the same thing that's happening everywhere, whether it be LA or Louisville or out in New York. I think it's what has happened in the past. It's kind of the traditions that they have and the food that there's to discover from, it's a part of America that I just haven't explored yet. I mean, there's the Midwest, there's all the way out west, there's, down south's just one I haven't been able to tap into yet. It's great. I go down there and I eat till I'm sick almost, and then I come back and I have all these new ideas. So
I'm curious, when you do have a day off, when you've got a little bit of time to yourself, you've been in New York for a very long time, what's two of your favorite spots that you just keep going back to over and over and over again?
I go to Blue Ribbon Sushi all the time. We just did this thing on Zagat's about like what's your favorite thing you eat, and the oxtail fried rice has just been one I can't stay away from. I love that stuff. And then I try to get out of the city a lot on my days off, as I'm sure you would know. I mean, you work here all the time. You're surrounded by all the noise and everything. So I try to shoot out to Long Island, see my family. Upstate, go on a small trip, something like that. I mean, if I go out to Long Island, I usually hit Little Vincent's Pizza in my town. It's the best pizza ever. I mean,
best pizza in the world.
Best pizza in the world.
First.
Yep. I just try to find new things. I mean, if not, I'm usually eating in my apartment or just trying to get outside and cool down a little bit and get some rest.
Standing over a garbage can at Acme eating a
exactly
quick family meal.
I mean, it's probably the only day of the week I eat off a plate.
Brian, thanks for joining us here. Everyone, please come and find him at Acme Restaurant. Where is it located? What's the address?
It's 9 Great Jones Street off Lafayette.
Awesome. And you're open for dinner 7 days a week?
Tuesday through Sunday, closed on Mondays.
Great. Brian, thanks again for being here. Please join us every Tuesday at 11 a.m. for another chef interview here on Heritage Radio. This is The Line.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to hear about exclusive events, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at heritage_radio. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Rate the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join our community by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.
Hey, are you hungry? Well, you're in luck. Meat and 3 is back for season 16. I'm Taylor Early, and we've got a whole new batch of reporters I am so excited to introduce you to.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Fisher.
Asha McElroy.
Sam Girardi.
Jessica Gingrich.
Hannah from Wisconsin.
I'm a swing dancing audio engineer.
I am a future registered dietitian nutritionist.
I'm from New York, and I love rice and beans.
My favorite food of all time is a shrimp burrito.
I love watermelon.
We've also got a bonus podcast for you called Behind the Internship. 3 of our reporters will take you along to show how they develop stories for this very show, Meat and 3.
Hi, I'm Danielle Flitter, a plant-based chef from Philadelphia, living in Mexico City.
I'm Sophia Hooper. I'm a bartender based in Portland, Maine.
My name is Addison Austin Liu. I am a chef and food journalist from Salt Lake City, Utah, and my favorite food is Peruvian.
Rice and beans.
Hand-drawn noodle soup.
So tune in to enjoy a square meal for your ears. And I hope you saved a little room for dessert.